Hello everyone, my name is Professor Cynthia Lum and I'm the Deputy Director and Associate Professor of the Center for Evidence-Based Crime Policy at George Mason University. The center is housed in the Department of Criminology, Law and Society, and we specialize in this topic of evidence-based policing. This module is designed for both the entry-level officer in training and also officers and detectives that are participating in in-service training who may be new to evidence-based policing. This module and its study guide is freely available along with many more advanced training videos and resources at George Mason University's Center for Evidence-Based Crime Policy Matrix Demonstration website, as you can see here. In this module, I'll cover 4 main lessons. First, I'll discuss what the term evidence-based policing means and why it's so important for officers today to know what the research says about police interventions and tactics. Now, after defining evidence-based policing, I'll then review 3 general principles about what we know from the research as to what types of policing strategies work well in reducing crime. Third, I'll give some concrete examples and ideas about how these general principles translate into actual patrol actions and activities, and also provide 4 resources for you to access if you want to find out more ideas and examples. And finally, I'll review some common challenges that you'll face when trying to implement these and other types of problem-solving, intelligence-driven, evidence-based innovations. It's really important to recognize some of these challenges so that you're prepared well to quickly adapt and overcome them. Also attached to this module is a detailed study guide and assessment questions that match this presentation. Again, I'll also give you some links to find out more information at our website. Okay, so let's begin. What does evidence-based policing mean, and why is it important for law enforcement officers to learn about research evidence just as you're learning about procedures or how to use equipment? Evidence-based policing is a law enforcement perspective, which says that officers should not only be equipped with the right equipment, knowledge of the law, proper procedures, and defensive tactics, but that they also have to have high-quality knowledge about what tactics and strategies work best to fight crime. It reflects a belief that law enforcement shouldn't just carry out tactics based on what was done yesterday, or best guesses, or even just standard procedures. Rather, officers should leverage the large body of information and analysis available about what works in terms of preventing crime, detecting suspects. It reflects the belief that law enforcement shouldn't just carry out tactics based on what was done yesterday, or best guesses, or even just standard operating procedures. Rather, that officers should leverage the large body of information and analysis available about what works in terms of preventing crime, detecting suspects, or improving their relationships with citizens to maximize crime control effectiveness and also improve the quality of policing. Now, implied in this definition is that police have not always used tactics and strategies that are effective. In other words, the norm in policing has not always been the inclusion of research knowledge or analysis in tactical and strategic decision-making. Most training focuses on police procedures, the law, use of equipment. But just as officers are trained in the importance of their weapons, the law, standard procedures, equipment, and interpersonal skills to respond to crime, they also need to be trained in knowledge about what approaches in policing work best, either to reduce crime or increase their ability to be fair and legitimate officers of the law. Now, the idea that we should pay attention to research studies about policing, whether that research is about police tactics, officer stress and health, or better ways to interact with the public, is really not a new concept. The concept comes from the medical treatment field, actually. We want doctors to use interventions, treatments, and medications that have been shown to be effective through legitimate research. A doctor that operates only based on his own experience and who doesn't keep up with the research and what has been shown to be effective or harmful may end up using an old-fashioned treatment that isn't effective, or worse, that may have long-term negative effects down the road. For example, let's say that during patrol, you happen to get a relatively minor gash on your arm from a suspect who's trying to stab you with a dirty knife during an arrest. Strong medical research tells us that you should seek medical attention, get the wound cleaned and bandaged, and probably take a series of antibiotics. On the other hand, one of your friends tells you, just cover the area with some wet mud, a home remedy that will do the trick. He said he did it once and it worked wonders. Well, which option works best? Obviously, you're going to choose the option that has been shown to be effective through rigorous scientific tests, not the option based on a friend's anecdotal experience. Now, I understand this might sound like an exaggerated example, but in the past, policing also valued anecdotal experiences and did not take full advantage of the research knowledge that's out there. However, as with medical treatments, there are good reasons why we want to use police tactics that have been shown to be effective through rigorous evaluation. First, the medicine's effects have been scientifically tested and we know it works. Similarly, in policing, there are many patrol tactics that have been evaluated through rigorous analysis and have been shown to be effective in preventing crime, improving officer health, or improving police legitimacy with the community. Second, the reason why we trust the first option is that these medical tests were replicated in different settings and places and on different people. And similarly, in policing, there are a number of generalizations that can be gleaned from the research that officers can apply in many different jurisdictions that can improve their effectiveness. Neither crime nor policing is as unique to specific jurisdictions as agencies might think. And finally, research also helps us know whether the medical treatment will cause side effects or make matters worse. Similarly, in criminal justice, through research, we now know that there are some interventions that are ineffective and harmful. Some very common examples are things like DARE, boot camps, and Scared Straight. So research really helps us better understand what tactics work, which police tactics don't work, and perhaps even which tactics will make things worse. So it's really important, given this medical example, that officers are armed not only with their weapons, with defensive tactics, with the law and their equipment, but that they are also armed with the best information and knowledge that will help them keep crime down in their beats, reduce their stress, and improve their ability to interact with citizens in fair and legitimate ways. Now, this seems logical, right? Well, the problem is that while this may seem a logical approach to policing, there are many reasons why police, and as well as doctors, educators, and social service providers, many folks do not pay attention to research to hone their craft. Some of these reasons have to do with research not being translated and disseminated to agencies in ways that are useful. Some police tactics have yet to be evaluated. For example, many investigative approaches have never been researched, and we don't know what might work better in terms of certain types of investigations. But one main reason, I would argue, has to do with organizational cultures and systems that are ingrained in agencies that impede adopting new ideas. Now I'll come back to this again in learning objective number 4, but let me just briefly mention some of these here. Even in the field of medicine, research evidence and knowledge is sometimes ignored. Take a look at this passage from Sherman's Ideas in American Policing piece on evidence-based policing. He states that Semmelweis found evidence that maternal death in childbirth could be reduced if doctors washed their hands before delivering babies. He then tried to apply this research to medical practice in Vienna, which led to his being driven out of town by his boss, the chief obstetrician. Hundreds of thousands of women died because the profession refused to comply with his evidence-based guidelines for some 40 years. Similarly, in law enforcement, research knowledge often doesn't stand on its own merits. Even though today there is much research on all aspects of policing that, when applied, can improve both officer and agency performance, police organizations have their traditions, habits, and standard operating procedures in the way that they respond to crime. And they've done this for many, many years. So not only are habits hard to break, but there are systems and organizational aspects to policing that work against evidence-based approaches. Many of these systems reinforce a reactive approach to policing that emphasizes, for example, making an arrest lawfully and according to procedures, responding to different 911 calls professionally and promptly, submitting physical evidence properly and maintaining the chain of evidence, and also rules on officer appearance, behavior, and work ethic. In fact, this is probably what makes up the bulk of your standard operating procedures that you learn about in the academy. Now, don't get me wrong, all of these things are very important. Adhering to the rule of law, carrying out arrests, responding to calls for service professionally and lawfully are incredibly important to the police officer's role and must be learned. But those activities actually only reflect a portion, and it's often less than 50% of a patrol officer's entire shift. Further, we now know that many of these efforts will not reduce or prevent crime, will not increase your probability of catching offenders. Evidence-based policing is a law enforcement style that emphasizes a more balanced response to 911 and arrest, and balancing that response with preventing crime through effective strategies when you're not answering calls or making arrests. The goal is not to just respond well to calls, but to reduce them in the first place and deter offending so that arrest can be avoided. These subject matters are not often covered in criminal or police procedures or in traditional training. So not only does evidence-based policing mean that officers need to have the best information about how to be as effective as possible, but evidence-based policing can utilize all sorts of research knowledge that's out there. And this knowledge can include how officers can be more fair, how they can improve their interaction with victims and offenders, how they might reduce their stress, or even how they can improve their overall physical health. So that ends learning objective number 1 on the definition of evidence-based policing. And in the next module, we'll be discussing what is the actual evidence.